Hello everyone, welcome back. So today I have assembled my priority shelf, and now I haven't always called it that. It's just a name that I actually came up with recently, but I used to do this thing where every year I would get together a bunch of books and put them in one place in a prominent location, and those were the books that I wanted to be out where I could see them because those were the books that I wanted to read that year. And I kind of quit doing that because I realized that I was going too far, right? Like I would take 2 years worth of reading and put them in one place, and then I would wonder why I was never chipping away at this huge stack of books, this huge shelf of books. And so I just quit doing that all of last year and most of the year before that. And I thought that I would revive that for 2026. And this time I'm just going to take some books that I know that I can read this year. It's not a TBR. It's just these are the books that I would like to get through. These are the books that maybe when I'm in between other books and don't know which one to turn to, I can turn to this shelf and just go, okay, it's time to read that one. And they will go probably right here with the horror short story collections I am going to be rereading this year as my first Booktube project, and I have finished the first book in that project, which was Stephen King's Night Shift, and I should be talking about that soon. I'm a little backed up here on videos, so we're going to just dive right into this, my priority shelf. And it is in no particular order. I think maybe the fiction is with the fiction and the nonfiction is mostly with the nonfiction. I might mix it up a little. The first book to go on the priority shelf is Giovanni Boccaccio's The Decameron. And so, from what I understand, this is a book, this is very old. It is from, I'm not sure when, maybe the 1300s. It's very old. Not this, not this edition, of course, but uh, so what I understand is that this book is about, I think, 10 people who gather in a villa in Italy to wait out an outbreak of the plague, and each day they each tell one story, and it lasts for 10 days. So, from what I understand, they're pretty bawdy. They're pretty, I'm not sure if they're erotic. I asked over a year ago in a video if these were like erotic stories, and nobody ever answered that question. So, I guess I'm on my own. I've heard a lot of people talk about this, but one of the interesting things about Booktube is that I can watch whatever video I want because the information usually goes in and then it just kind of like goes right back out. So that is The Decameron by Boccaccio. And I was thinking what would be interesting to do is to read this over 10 days and to read 10 stories every day. So that's kind of what I would like to do. Next is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. So I have actually had a copy of In Cold Blood for 20 some odd years now and never read it. I used to have a first edition hardcover. It was really neat, but it was not worth anything because someone had taken a cup of coffee and put it down on it and left a big ring right on the cover. Now I don't really read a lot of true crime or anything like that, so that's one reason I haven't read In Cold Blood. I'm very interested in Truman Capote, though. Last night I sat down and I watched I've seen it before. It's very interesting. It is an episode of William F. Buckley's Firing Line with Truman Capote, where they talk about the death penalty, or they debate the death penalty, Buckley and Capote. Very, very good. And if I remember, I'll leave a link to that. It is 58 minutes long. It is very much worth watching. I think it's from 1968. But so this is about the murder of the Clutter family in Kansas. And I feel like after having a copy of this book for so long, I need to read it, but I also need to read it because this is the origin of true crime, and this is probably Capote's greatest work. It's certainly what he is known for more than anything else. After that is The Hunters by James Salter. So I've had this for quite some time. I did hear the Outlaw Bookseller talk about this probably 2 years ago, but I've had this longer than then. I was kind of interested to hear him talk about it. So from what I understand, it is about an American F-86, I think was the F-86 the Super Sabre jet pilot, fighter pilot in Korea. And he is supposed to be very, everyone expects him to be very brave and very masculine. And from what I remember, he keeps going on flights and sort of perhaps not going all the way, not he's sort of shrinking back or something of that nature, and people start to think that he is a coward. I'm really interested in reading this one. After that is The Cruise of the Raider Wolf by Roy Alexander. It's not much to look at, I know. When this was printed, it had a really neat cover, but that was lost to me. It does have a nice map on the inside, though. This was, let's see, from 1939. This is a first-hand account of being a prisoner on the Raider Wolf. So in World War I, there was a German raider. It was a ship. It looked kind of like a merchant ship, and it went around and raided other merchant ships, enemy merchant ships. And this guy was on one of them and was taken prisoner. And he spent quite a long time because the Raider Wolf was at sea for several years, if I remember right. And I have had this book for 15 years, and I want to read it. So after that is The Reason Why by Cecil Woodham-Smith, and I have 2 copies, 2 editions. And now this one I can't really read. This is one of those time books. It is very, very fragile. You can't open it. It'll break in 2, but it has a more interesting cover. So this is about the charge of the Light Brigade and during the Crimean War. And I never can remember exactly when the Crimean War was. Was that in the 1850s? I'm not sure. But of course there was some sort of mistake. The Light Brigade charged into battle, and from what I remember, most of them were killed, and a great poet wrote a poem about it. And I would like to read The Charge of the Light Brigade, or the reason why, not The Charge of the Light Brigade, but the reason why the Charge of the Light Brigade happened. After that is The Last Voyage of the Lusitania. So this is from the 50s, and this the authors, A.A. Holing and Mary Holing, they spoke to survivors of the Lusitania, which was torpedoed by a German U-boat in, I want to say, 1915. And I did actually already start this one, but I don't know why, but I think I had just finished one story about the sea, which I really like this bookmark too. It's a Joseph Beth bookmark that I got someplace. But I had just finished one story about the sea, and I started this one, and I thought, well, I would rather move on to something not about ships. So after that, we have Let the Right One In. And now the reason this is on the list is because I've had this copy for 13 years, and by Jean Ajvid Lindqvist. I don't know how to pronounce his name. You'll have to forgive me there, and maybe someone can tell me. I looked up how to pronounce his name, but it is a strange thing when you look up like how to pronounce someone's name, but the pronunciation they give you is always more confusing than the name itself. So there's that. This is about a vampire, and if I remember, I liked this particular movie. I didn't see the other one, the American version, so I've been wanting to read that for some time. Next is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I've had this for quite some time also, and I did start this a while back, but I kind of expected this one to be heartrending, kind of sad or bittersweet, or anything that might bring up those terrible emotions that I keep locked away within me. But I would like to read this. I've heard so many good things about this, and I think this year is the year. So this is a book that I have had since I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I want to get to it. It's actually a play. It is Arthur Miller's The Crucible. And I am just tired of having had this book for so long and not having read it yet. I saw the film version with Winona Ryder, and of course, his name would go right out of my head. The guy who played Bill the Butcher and I Drink Your Milkshake. What was his name? I'll remember it right after I put this down. So this is about the Salem witch trials. And I think the reason that I haven't read this is probably because I find Puritanism sort of exasperating. I know that's kind of the point of the book. So after that is Alexandre Dumas' The Night of Maison Rouge. I probably didn't pronounce Maison correctly. I have no idea. So from what I understand, this is one of Dumas' lost stories. So it was just kind of forgotten about for quite some time. This is about a man who in Paris during the early days of the French Revolution, a man saves a beautiful young woman, and I am sure she happens to be someone very important, probably in the royal family, something like that. And I don't know what happens after that. I read The Count of Monte Cristo several years ago, 6, 7, I bet it's been 8 years ago now. And so I enjoyed that. I felt like Dumas kind of padded it a little bit, that he kept it going because he was getting a weekly paycheck. Not that that made it, even the filler was very good, but there were some chapters where I was like, this isn't really necessary. I did read the complete version, the great big penguin version, so I'm looking forward to reading this. And this is translated by, there's a big sticker over it, Julie Rose. After that is E.M. Forster's Passage to India. I don't really know much about this. I do know that it centers on some British women who go to India, and they go to a cave, and then they accuse an Indian man of, I think, sexual assault, some sort of indecency. I'm not sure if it's ever laid down exactly in this book, given to when this was written, but I don't know. I really like this cover. I've heard a lot of people talk about this book, about how they like this book, and I've heard about Forster for many years. So that is going on the shelf. After that is The Pillow Book of Cy Shonagon. And so this is a very old book. So this is from the 10th century in Japan, at the height of the Heian culture. And Cy Shonagon was a court lady, I suppose. I'm not exactly sure what she did in the royal court. I know that she was around the emperor and the empress. I don't know exactly what her job would entail. I guess I'll learn it from this book. I'm looking forward to this. I have read sections of this, and she seems a little bit frustrating sometimes, because a lot of her interests, from what I can tell, are about fashion and about, like, I remember reading one about how a servant was ugly, and like it fits them right to have to push a broom because they're so ugly. And she doesn't seem like a particularly kind person, but it is, ancient, quite literally ancient. We are able to see inside someone's, or not, well, not technically inside their mind, but we get their thoughts on paper, and that is just incredible. So, I remember the first time I ever had that feeling where I went, wow, I am reading the words that someone wrote, 2,000 years ago. I was reading the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and I think, there are only a few parts of the Meditations that I really like if the cucumber is bitter, throw it out. If there are brambles in the way, go around. That is probably my favorite line from the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. But just realizing that I was inside this man's thoughts, I was reading this man's personal thoughts that he put on paper 2,000 years ago, was really incredible to me. And it was kind of like a light bulb moment where I realized that that's what reading is. We read someone's thoughts put down on paper for all to see. That is just wild, isn't it? So the next is Tenazan, The Battle of Okinawa and the Atomic Bomb by George Pfeiffer. And it has a cool blurb by Studs Terkel on the back. And I'm a really big fan of Studs Terkel's work, in a way. Now, Studs Terkel, just to go off on a ramble here for a moment, Studs Terkel was, I believe he worked in radio for quite some time, but he went around the country collecting oral accounts of, say, the 1920s and that sort of thing. And they're really good. There's one about the Second World War. There's one called Working, or maybe it's On Work. I don't know. It's been a while since I read that. But Terkel had kind of a frustrating habit where he would not write down where he was talking to these people, or uh, he did not add any sort of reference in their oral accounts, so that they would go off talking about a factory, and we'd be going, okay, well, what factory, where, what were you producing, what year was this, and that was frustrating about Terkel's work to me, but I love his books anyway. So Okinawa has some personal, like, family connections to me, and so right now, actually, my brother lives on Okinawa with his wife and their dog. And also, so our great grandpa fought on Okinawa in 1945. He was very young. I think he was 17, or maybe he was 18 by then. Okinawa is the last major battle of the Pacific Campaign, and right afterwards, the atomic bomb was dropped. Well, the bombs were dropped, and this is all about that. And I actually have a book that my great grandpa gave me. It's about Okinawa, somewhere right over here, and I've never read it. Kind of seemed a little bit dry, but I bought this a couple of years ago. I was going to read this last year, year before last, and I just never got around to it. And so the next book on the list might seem a little bit strange, but it is Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile. My reasoning for this is that I have read all of Agatha Christie's other major works, as far as I'm concerned, or not concerned, but as far as I know, I've read all of her other major works, like Murder on the Orient Express and Then There Were None. And I don't think that I read any of Agatha Christie's novels last year. I have quite a few of them over there. In fact, I think I have like 15 of them or something. I have a couple of those, like omnibus editions where there's 4 or 5 novels in each. And the reason for that is that I read a couple of stinkers back to back. So, like, I don't really like Miss Marple novels, I've realized. And I read At Bertram's Hotel, which I just did not like at all. And then before that, I think I read Passenger to Frankfurt. And that is just, it's one of her later books. It may have been her last book, but it was not very good, to be honest. And there is a character in Passenger to Frankfurt. It's an older woman, and she, like, gives this monologue at the end about how all the kids these days with their long hair and their rock music, they're rebelling against things, and they don't even understand what they're destroying. And she just served as like this mouthpiece for Agatha Christie, as far as I could tell. And it was not a particularly good book. Um, I don't always really care for Agatha Christie's novels, because I don't always see how she gets from A to B. And there's a little too much of, uh, yeah, I don't know how she gets from A to B all the time. So it just kind of seems like we are left in the dark till the end, while Poirot or Miss Marple is gathering all this stuff together. But when it's laid out on the table, it doesn't always add up, really. Uh, but anyway, that's my long roundabout way of saying I want to read Death on the Nile. Uh, Here is Arabian Sands by Wilfred Fessinger. So this is his account of going through the empty quarter of Arabia, I guess the Sahara Desert. I don't know a whole lot about this. I know that he also wrote a book called The Marsh Arabs, which is supposed to be really good. And this is one of the very big books in travel literature, so our travelogues, and I want to read it. After that, we have a almost certainly depressing book by George Orwell, The Road to Wigan Pier. And so from what I understand, this is kind of like his book Down and Out in Paris and London, except this one takes place in England, in, let's see, Yorkshire and Lancashire. So he would be, I guess he went and spent time with the working class people of Yorkshire and Lancashire and saw the terrible, terrible conditions under which they lived and worked. And I remember reading someplace that there is no Wigan Pier, right? So we've only got two more. The next one is The Trouble with Physics, The Rise of String Theory, The Fall of a Science of What Comes Next by Lee Smolin. I've had this for probably 6 or 7 years now. I'm not sure if I've had it that long, but I've had it for quite some time. And this interests me because Smolin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but he is a dissenting voice against string theory. So, like the idea that particles are well, you know what? It's above me, to be honest with you. I've been hearing about string theory for many, many, many years, and it just never seems to stick. And I've read books about it, and Smolin, from what I understand, has a problem with string theory because it is untestable, and there are so many different variants of this, so many different ideas, but none of them are testable. And Smolin thought apparently that was holding back physics, and perhaps they should go in other ways, but that the string theorists were being rewarded and being touted and put on these television shows, and other people with other theories were pretty much being shoved aside or even let go from their positions and things like that. So that would be a really interesting one to read. The last book I read about physics, and I'm not going to say who the author was because it wasn't his fault, but I tried to read it, and I would get like 10 pages in, and I would just, it was like that book you read and then you fall asleep, right? And it was an interesting book, but I just can't seem to keep all of that stuff straight in my head, and it's why I'm not a physicist. And so the last one is Irving Goffman's The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And this is about how, from what I understand, how people play roles, how we see people in these certain roles and we accept them by the way they act and the way they are dressed and that sort of thing. Let's see what it says here. The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. Dr. Goffman uses the metaphor of theatrical performance as a framework. Each person in everyday social intercourse presents himself and his activity to others, attempts to guide and control the impressions they form of him, and employs certain techniques in order to sustain his performance, just as an actor presents a character to an audience. So that sounds pretty interesting. I have his book, I think it's called Asylums too. Goffman, Asylums, and it seems like I had another one, but I think that the other one that I had didn't interest me very much, and I wound up selling it so I could buy a camera. But anyway, that is my priority shelf. So I don't think I could do a pyramid here, but maybe I can just kind of hold up some of them, and there's a few of them there, and there's a few of them here. And so it's not a huge shelf. I mean, it may seem like quite a lot of books, but it is not undoable for 12 months of reading. And once again, I don't actually have to read all of these books this year. These are just the books that I am going to put somewhere in a prominent place. And so when I need a book to read, I will go to that shelf first. And if none of the books interest me on that shelf at the moment, I'll just go find something else. But perhaps I will pick up In Cold Blood or Death on the Nile. And it is not a TBR. That's what I'm trying to say. It is not a TBR. I'm not committing myself to these books. I just want to put them in one place so that I have them right there to look at. That is my priority shelf. And I want to thank you for watching. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you do anything like this? Would you consider doing something like this? Does it interest you? Does it not interest you? But anyway, I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.